Well, our next activity is advancing the stories of Roanoke. In an earlier episode, we each brought our Zettelkasten images of a Zettelkasten that was discovered in the Roanoke community, because that's one of the central ideas that we have that began us, is the idea that people in the modern era have been separated by this great moment of separation that took a whole group of ancestors and moved them apart in a way that they could not communicate across time and space. And now the location has been discovered, much like discovering the lost colony of Roanoke. And the moderns are coming in with their modern minds to try to decipher what they're finding, archaeologically speaking, in the ruins of the society of the ancient ones who are gone. And one of the things that they find are individual Zettelkastens. And so in an earlier episode, we were each invited to introduce our Zettelkasten. And so in this time, we are invited to introduce a character, either the character that created the Zettelkasten that needs to be deciphered, or a little more about the character who deciphers the Zettelkasten. So we're just going to be telling a little bit about our stories, or if you want to read your story, whichever way you want to do it. Who would like to participate in this second activity?
Well, I can go.
Okay.
Um, this is actually the first writing I've done for the Roanoke project, because I didn't do the first assignment. But I've been talking about the character idea that I had of um, a young person who, due to congenital reasons, can't connect to the link the way that others do. And so he speaks, he prefers to speak rather than over the link, aloud rather than over the link. And that's considered somewhat childish because only children speak because they aren't connected to the link already. Anyway, I wrote a little bit about him. Javi is his name. And one of his other traits is that since the link is not really pleasant for him, he can connect to it, but it's sort of staticky and doesn't work that well. Um, he likes to watch old videos that he finds in the archive. They're just, image and sound, whereas the I'm imagining the sort of standard entertainment over the link is like these immersive, full, sensual, experiences that you would get through the link. Whereas, well, he doesn't really enjoy that, so he finds these old movies, essentially videos in the archive, and that's what he likes to watch. And that will serve him well when he comes to trying to open one of the Zettelkastens that they found. So in this little snippet, this is a very brief sketch out of the scene, just getting the major parts. There's another researcher that I don't know who that's going to be. It might be a character that I come up with. It might be one of somebody else's, but I'm imagining it in the place that we've already described, where there's the different writings on the stones and etc. Okay, so Javi and the other researcher stared intently at the words inscribed in the stone. Speak and enter. Javi felt a surge of excitement through the link, muted by the ever-present static. And this is what he hears over the link. I know this. I read it in an old story. The other person cleared their throat and then carefully and clearly spoke. Open, see, same. Nothing happened. Javi was baffled. Forgetting the link, he blurted aloud, What? What does that even mean? And then over the link, it's a password, I think. And aloud, Javi says, Do you mean open sesame? There was a faint click, and the stone slid out of the way, and the scent of paper wafted out of the void.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
All right.
So in my little snippet, I introduce a little bit more about my little character. I've named her Alex, and her thing is She also has a strained relationship with the link. We don't know why yet, but the upshot of all of this is I picture her as maybe a kind of early high school age, but she can't read. So she's going to have to make connections. Kathleen and I were talking about establishing meaning and making meaning, and then being able to use that meaning to communicate and ultimately to decipher. So that's kind of the direction where this thread is coming from and heading to. And it's called Learning to Fly because she's going to have to figure some things out. Canoptic jars were a well-known artifact found in the memorial graves containing mummies. The most precious jars were the alabaster, sourced from the Egyptian town of Alabastron, but few remembered, as the link to that history was long lost in The Link. Alex remembered. She didn't know how she knew, but she knew that immersion in hot water could make the jars like marble called marmo de Castellina. She wanted her notes written on a scroll, stored in a jar that also contained the specimens. Then she wanted her jars stored in a box, a locked box. Maybe she'd use the same box where the garden note cards were kept. No one else gave it much thought, but she couldn't stop thinking about it. 1100, the pressings. 1101, the seeds. 1102, the detailed diagrams. The notes. It always ended with the notes. She called up a picture of them in her mind, concentrating on the loopy forms broken up by dash and asterisk and pound and exclamation point. All of the loops and the symbols walking along within the lines. Then it bubbled up to her, slowly at first, then with great urgency. She would copy them by hand. She would will the meaning out of the indecipherable cipher. Then she would master her own.
Oh, love it.
But
Yeah.
mine focuses on the other end of the time frame when the link is first being created, and the ancestors are creating these Zettelkastens that they know they're leaving for a future generation. We don't know yet why or how they know that they're going to need to do. That hasn't been determined yet, but everybody's very busy creating their Zettelkastens. And then my story brings in a character who is, again, doesn't think in the normal way that people think. And the link is about getting so that we're all at least on a common set of facts, which is a very big problem because it's hard to have communication if people look at the same situation and don't share the same facts. And so, but she was a question of, well, did she even really comprehend what was a fact? So let me read, and you'll see what I mean. Ultimately, Teresita was fitted with the link, more because they couldn't agree on the reason it should be withheld, rather than any expected value to be gained in providing her with one. What good is the ability to share facts with someone who wrote as the answer to 2 + 2 a drawing of a star, while answering 3 + 1 with a little picture of a mouse? But while it was troublesome for the others at first, they soon learned to tune her out. Teresita, however, listened to everything, and she began collecting small objects to make sense of what she heard. She filed each small object with a cast-off file card in the handwriting of the one whose thoughts the object captured. Since everyone seemed intent upon assembling their regular file card Zettelkastens, and since in normal life they seldom wrote anything longhand, cast-off cards were easy to come by. Everyone thought the shoebox she carried with her everywhere was her Zettelkasten. But it was just her gathering space. Her real Zettelkasten was the floor, or rather the spaces under the tiles. For the hexagonal tiles capped a honeycomb structure that provided support and insulation for the floor while remaining very lightweight. The spaces accidentally provided a near endless collection of little places to tuck things away once the secret of how to lift the tiles had popped into the link one spring morning. Teresita began dancing with the thought at once, and so as a consequence, no one else heard it. Except, of course, the one who first thought it, whoever he or she was.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm going to define some terms here before I get going. So I was thinking about the fact that in the link, you would probably want to have the ability to have, you know, when you're talking to certain people versus direct messaging them, right? So I've got two different modes in the link that you can be straddling when you're communicating, and the intimate one is thou, and the more public one, less intimate, is ye. So that's going back to the Old English words. Thou and ye. Okay.
Awesome.
And we're going to meet. So this is Jenna, who we've met already. We saw her with Grandpa in the vault, encountering the Zettelkasten of the ancestors. So this is prior to that. This is leading up to how it was that she got to be there. So Jenna and Dylan stepped out of the food court and onto the path that connects the southwest and northeast corners of the campus. Their two heads, nodding, bobbing, and raring, staged a silent pageant above four gesticulating arms. I'm telling you, I did not see this coming, Jenna insisted. Oh, I have zero doubt about that, Dylan said. I'm curious to know what you did see coming. As they were about to pass the Lamy fountain, she saw Chris from Scene Design, sky-gazing from his frequent perch. She was about to do a sneak scan of his profile when he stood right up and strode purposefully toward her. Jenna, hi. Congratulations on winning the effigy. I can't wait to experience it. To Dylan, still in thou with her, Jenna said, beyond the last person I expected to talk with today. Dylan tossed back, I'll be right with you. I've just got some corn popping. With what she hoped had been reasonable latency, Jenna replied, oh, wow, Chris, thanks. The proposal is one thing, but making it stick will be quite another. Dylan cackled. Who in Jane Austen was that? Jenna said, hey, you're lucky I got anything out. He knocked me plumb off my rope. I hadn't noticed, Jenna heard over pops and sizzles. The linked have many words for silence. The split-second awkward hitch in the previous moment had been classic three crowd. Too often thou, third waits in ye. Every Lydian child in adult care, which was to say every child, would have experienced 1,000 examples of three crowd by the time they put two of their own thoughts together. Chris broke it with, hey, I doubt you know this, but I work evenings at the Henge. I would be happy to help you find the spot for your effigy. Jenna suddenly felt herself to be a very infinitely long and even more infinitely narrow vertical line. Some Jenna operator who didn't depend on Jenna's prior configuration kept patter going. You mean they literally don't already know where to put it? It's actually up to me? Chris's eyes smiled into hers. What they would know better than you, Jenna? She said, well, I feel stupid now. Until this very moment, I figured that part was pure ceremony. Dylan schmoozed into the ye. How long since you were last at the Henge, Jenna? Jenna turned to Dylan and said, was it that time in junior when you tossed your cookies on Charlotte Hart? Chris leaned in. What do you say? I'm there 6 to 10 tonight and tomorrow. It must be said, Chris was showing some talent for picking up cues. Jenna was no longer aware of these men in her midst. She was gone crafting. The effigy's place in the Henge, her call. Dylan sent Chris a fist knock meme of Pixie Kid Jenna ringmastering a cloud circus overhead. What Jenna means to say is, yes, tonight is perfect. Chris said, great, just hail me when you're on the way and I'll set up to be your guide. He exchanged a primal packet with Dylan and added, Bring any friend you want, of course. Jenna touched down long enough to say, "Oh yes, Chris, I can't thank you enough." "My honor. See you tonight." "Bye, Chris," they unisoned to his departing back. Back in thou, Dylan threw a puff of popcorn at her nose. "Well, Genesis, what have we here?"
Wow.
That's an interesting mix of dialogue to now have to keep track of different levels upon who is privy to the communication.
That's right.
Yeah, can you imagine? Oh, I meant to be saying that in how many times I've done a blast mail with
Yeah.
intimates.
Accidental reply all.
Yes. Stop replying all.
Anybody else have anything to contribute to the second activity before we go into concluding?
Well, I just want to say the whole notion of Jenna, I've got this whole notion of we have these yearly rituals, and these rituals, what would be happening in this particular one is that there's some phrase that's gone out of style, and we're kind of cleaning out the link. It's not an unlimited resource. Nobody uses this one anymore, but it was a good one. Let's archive it in the Henge.
Oh.
And so her effigy is of the phrase. I don't even know what it is, but it'll be something. And
Okay.
and then, well, where does it go in the Henge? Right? That was right out of the card picks its parent.
Uh-huh.
Zettelkasten.